Well, kia ora and good evening, Gerd. Thank you for joining us. It's morning where you are, so I hope it's a good morning. Thanks so much for giving us your time. Look, by way of introduction to yourself, can you talk a little bit about what led you to thinking about and then speaking about the future as your passion?
Yes, it's been a long road. I used to be a musician and producer, and I went to school in Berkeley College in Boston. And then in the 90s, I got involved with internet projects for digital music. Yeah. And I started a few companies in San Francisco in the dot-com years. And then very quickly, I realized I was quite good at understanding what's coming. Yeah. But I wasn't so good at realizing the business plan behind it. So my view was always 10 years early. So I started a company kind of like Spotify, in the 90s, and of course that didn't go. So I wrote my first book, The Future of Music, about the music business in 2004, and that became a bestseller. And then people started saying, well, about the future. And I'm like, I'm not really I don't do predictions, but I observe, right? So my work is not to tell people what's coming, which is ridiculous, nobody knows really, but is to kind of share my observations, hunches, intuition, what we call foresight, right? So my job is really all about foresight. It's not so much about, telling people what to do.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about that first book. What did you say about the future of music?
Well, it was quite obvious what we said. I had a co-writer there as well, but it was quite obvious already in the late 90s that music was moving to the cloud. So rather than having a piece of plastic or a tape recorder or whatever physical product, it would be much more efficient and faster and easier for everyone if it was in the cloud. But that was, of course, the idea of Napster. So we were involved with that in those days, and then the whole idea was in the book. We described the universal music device, which essentially became the iPhone. And we used the quote from David Bowie, who said, "Music will be like water." Right. That was in 2002, and we talked to his people about this, and then basically we said, okay, that's what we're talking about here, music like water. Right? It was completely obvious, really. With anybody that was in the business could see it, but the book became sort of the blueprint for the digital music business.
Cool. Yeah. We were just talking before we started recording. You did visit New Zealand several years ago, and you've been back, obviously, not in the last year. What were your impressions when you were here for work on how prepared for the future we are down here?
Well, New Zealand is a very special place. It's and there are lots of reasons for that. Not just as Jacinda Ardern, but there are many special reasons for this. I mean, I think the community of people in New Zealand is pretty amazing. How people hold together and how they are open to others and each other, and it's culturally quite different than pretty much almost the rest of the world, you could say. New Zealand and the future is kind of synonymous. In many ways, what New Zealand is doing is a sort of collective approach to social capitalism. Is kind of the ticket for the future. And in many ways, you could say we could learn a lot from how New Zealand does things. It's not all perfect, of course, and it's privileged to be in its position where it is now, geographically speaking, and so on. But I always found it very interesting that people are so interested in talking about the future and analyzing the future and getting ready for the future. While here in Europe, we're very much about the past and the present. We are much more about history, and we don't change very quickly. And I live in Switzerland, which is even more so, curious, but not really wanting to take a risk. And that has really impressed me about New Zealand, that people are saying, well, we need to move forward and take a risk and look at the future.
You're right. We are very fortunate to be what's been coined many years ago as the last bus stop before Antarctica, particularly around the COVID-19 situation. I mean, that's had a huge impact in our world and in many ways, and specifically on how we work. So if I could just, this is your bread and butter, but, what changes do you think that have come about by COVID-19 will actually last into that post-pandemic future?
Yeah, I basically always say about COVID-19, we're not going back to normal, whatever that was. Normal really wasn't good enough even before COVID. But COVID brought out like a giant focus and also an accelerator. It brought out all the things that were good and the things that were not so good. You know, both of them were amplified. So it's like people's mindset has shifted because of COVID. For example, we're realizing how great technology is that allows us to communicate remotely, like doing this, and that has been liberating for a lot of people. On the other hand, we realize there's a digital divide with people who can't either afford it, or they can't be online fast enough, or they don't know what to do, and it was a giant learning curve for everybody. So we realized it was good on the one hand. On the other hand, we have sort of a discrimination in many ways where people are not capable of doing it, then they're closed out, you know. And we also realized, for example, that equality is a major issue. So in New Zealand, you know, people were treated and you know, you had precautions and you took action and stuff. And that was like in Brazil or in America. No, you know, it's just basically the inequality that you have was amplified through COVID in those countries like the US and the UK and also Brazil. While in New Zealand, people move together, right? It seems, at least to me, it's just different culturally. And then now with COVID, we also realize, for example, that in order to tackle something really threatening, like the COVID virus, we have to come up with compromises, and we have to actually do something serious about it, and we have to do emergency measures. And that is now becoming the blueprint for climate change. So I always say COVID-19 is a test run for climate change. Because now we're saying, you know, the next big challenge we're having when COVID is, you know, moving away in the rear mirrors one day, hopefully, you know, whenever that is. And now it's like, okay, now we're saying, okay, the next big thing is going to be climate change. And then after that, artificial intelligence, you know, for the things that machines can do in 20, 30 years. So we have to be able to agree to take collective action, to work together. And COVID-19 has taught us how to do that, or it has pointed out when it wasn't happening, right? So it's been like a giant focus.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. So just can we just dial in then a little bit on technology then? So sort of digital transformation and the acceleration we've seen through that. You have talked about it showing, you know, it's a bit patchy in places, but what were the technologies that you think really shone through, or well, are still shining through?
Well, I mean, it's clear that in the crisis, we had to figure out a way to communicate better, to do things that were normally physical. Now we have to do them digitally. And that pushed a lot of people. I think Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella said that basically we had more digital transformation in the last 12 months than the previous 10 years. That's because we had a reason to transform. Like all the schools went online, you know? And many of them not very successfully, of course, because of the limited budgets and so on, inequality, again, the divide and those kind of things. But technology showed us that it's possible to do that, and that we don't have to be an engineer to go online and do a video call. And e-commerce has exploded, right? And mobile devices and 5G is now basically, it's the savior, right? And in so many ways, technology has become much more useful. And now you have like 100 companies who do nothing but virtual conference rooms, like Hop-In and other companies. Like there is, you know, I mean, I think in 2 or 3 years, I'm going to sit here, I'm going to travel in a hologram to Beijing to deliver a speech. And COVID had cranked up all these things about tech, you know, and that people felt like they can actually do something. And that will not go back. I think we are going to keep traveling and meeting each other when we can. But virtual things and hybrid things are going to be a big part of our future.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm going to bring it back to New Zealand because that's where I am and the people who are listening are here. So we have the aim of New Zealand being in the top 10 digital ready nations by 2030. We're about 19th at the moment, according to some measures. As an outsider looking at us, what big ideas do you think a country like ours, a small one, should focus on?
Well, you know, I think when it's about digital readiness and the digital future, it is a mistake to just look at technology, because technology is kind of a commodity in many ways. And you know, New Zealand is not going to be the leader in global AI research. You know, that's kind of a contested position. So I think that basically saying a digital readiness includes also the social, cultural, political, economic implications of technology. For example, what's clearly coming is that machines are going to get smart. I wouldn't call that intelligent, just smart. But that means that they can do our routine jobs. So routine jobs includes call center, driving, flying, possibly, right? But also things like automation of work, things like paralegals. Machines can do legal research now. And very soon we can speak to machines with voice-computer interfaces, and even after that we can connect directly with BCIs, brain-computer interfaces. So that's going to change the shape of work, and when the shape of work changes, education has to change.
Yeah.
So basically, it's the next 10 years. I always say will bring more change than the previous 100 years, and that is really what New Zealand has to prepare for. Is to have a balanced approach to the power of technology without becoming technology. Like, for example, if we're going to automate jobs, some of them will be automated to say 80%, like call centers. Can a machine answer a call to rebook your flight? Absolutely, it can, and it will. So we're talking about roughly about 18 million people around the world in the call center industry. And so government has to come up with programs to upskill those people. It has to get involved with taxation of robots, for example, as Bill Gates has pointed out. Nobody likes taxation, but anyway, the government has to be pretty smart about all these changes. Big data, privacy, digital identity. Much research shows that basically in 10 years, about 50% of the defense budget will be digital because of cybersecurity. And so there's tremendous opportunities, like we can solve climate change using technology, partly, of course, after we decide politically. We can solve diseases, right? But it will take a lot of wisdom to make the right decision between too much technology or, for example, surveillance, right? And that is going to be crucial to have wise governance of these issues.
That's fascinating. So just you write and you talk about the future of humanity and technology, and I was just trying to remember the name of your most recent book that we're giving away. But there's lots of voices around the impact of tech, robots, and AI as an example. I mean, could you just give us a couple of minutes nutshell on what your view on how this will actually play out?
Yeah, the book is called Technology versus Humanity.
That's right.
techbytes.nz. And basically, in a nutshell, we should not go into the future with fear. And we should not go into the future by saying we have to restrict science and research and technology because it may have a downside, depending, of course, how existential it is. Yeah. A hammer has a downside. I mean, I can take a hammer and kill somebody, or I can build a house. Technology is morally neutral until we use it. William Gibson. So that is one of the guiding lights into the future, is we have to develop and continue to develop technology, but certain things have to be understood and regulated together because they're extremely powerful. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning has great benefits as long as it's used in some way that is supplementing humans. But if we're going to invent artificial general intelligence, which is basically simulating what a human is, we may end up with a machine that has an IQ of 1 billion. And at that point, Elon Musk and many people have, and Hawkins have said this many times, at that point, we're going to need to agree on what this power can do and what it can't do. Right? Yeah. So too much of a good thing is a very bad thing. This is the header in my book. And basically, when we have good things, we want to keep them good. But when we do too much of them, like smoking cigarettes, alcohol, and so on, right, then it becomes a big problem. So technology has to be balanced with our human needs and our societal needs and our goal and our ethics, right? And that is the key message in the book. So it's both kind of proactive, so moving forward and inventing, right? And also precautionary, which means when it gets too difficult and too existential, we need to sit down and figure out together how we're going to respond, because we shouldn't just be doing whatever we can just because it's possible. I mean, it's going to be possible for you to live 150 years using technology, probably in the next 10 to 20 years. It's becoming technically possible. And what are the rules around this, right? And who gets to do it, right? And so those are all like really big societal questions that we have to take a look at now.
Yeah, and we're not going to be immune to that in a country our size down the bottom of the world, because while COVID is, our physical distance has worked for COVID, when it comes to technology and well, we know that for cybersecurity, we're just as prone as anybody else, because we're milliseconds from the rest of the world now, really, aren't we?
Yes, well, the other thing is, of course, New Zealand is in a great position to take over a sort of thought leadership on a lot of these issues, you know, because of the cultural integration, the collective approach, you know, Jacinda Ardern's speech about governing with kindness, you know, I mean, that is unheard of anywhere in the rest of the world. I mean, maybe here in Switzerland we would say something similar. I don't know, but we, you know, we have 7 people on the top, not just 1. But it's a different system here. But I think the idea of digital transformation in the next decade will come down to how we actually make it positive, rather than just using whatever is, like the Internet of Things, you know, and smart cities. All of these things are good. But you can see in Toronto how the sidewalk project by Google, how it ended up being rejected by everybody because it wasn't integrated in the cultural context.
Right.
And that is something that we really have to take a look at. We don't want to live in a world that's dehumanized or automated or becomes kind of like a world of algorithms, you know, because humans are not machines. At least I don't believe humans are machines. Some people do. But I think this is where New Zealand can take the leadership role and say, you know, humans and machines can help each other to get to the goal of a flourishing society. That has to be a goal, not just a flourishing stock market like we have in America.
Yeah. Hey, look, we didn't talk about this, but quite a few people who'll be watching this will be in that future leader group, sort of the 18 to 30-ish. Is there a particular skill sets or things they should be thinking about studying to prepare them to lead into that future?
Yeah, there's a few things. I call this a future mindset. And I always say the future is now a mindset. It's not a time frame. The future isn't about tomorrow. The future is already here. We just haven't noticed, you know, and the future is no longer like Arthur C. Clarke's Space Odyssey, or it's no longer about that. The future, in so many ways, if you look, you can see the future already here. Like, you know, we had the first Chinese doctor doing a CRISPR-Cas9 operation of genetic engineering on a human 3 years ago. Right? So the future mindset basically lives a part in the future and the rest of it in today. So you have sort of what's been called hybrid thinking, right? You take care of today, but you're also realizing what is coming down the road. And I'm not talking about 20 years here. I'm talking about 2, 3, 5, maybe 10 years, right?
Yeah.
And also to go away from the technical engineering point of view, that is a very big challenge for people who are trained in this way. You know, the world isn't an engineering problem. There are many things that, you know, there are many things that are engineering problems. You know, I'm from Germany, where that is a holy grail, of course, right? But in the end, you know, technology does not solve human problems or social problems. It makes them worse because it's efficient, right? So look at social media. Social media has not solved the media problem, right? And now we find out it's actually gotten a lot worse. So, yeah, and so my recommendation is that you look at technology and then you look at all of the neighboring things around it, you know, ethics, values, society, work, employment, policy, and all these things, and you develop a complete understanding of the ecosystem, right? And the other thing is what Bill Gates calls the 5-hour rule. Basically read about things that aren't imminent today 5 hours a week. So I call it, you know, 1 hour per day is all I ask. And when you do that, then you're starting to develop a kind of understanding of the future that will be almost a guarantee for your future employment and success, because you start thinking about how you're going to respond, and that will forge your path into the future.
Great. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much. Just to finish up, do you want to talk about what you're thinking about next? I know you're off to do some filming. Where's your brain heading off to at the moment?
Yes, you know, I'm working on a big project called the Good Future. And the Good Future tries to define what good is. and that already is not easy, right? And then to define how we get to the good future. And so in a nutshell, the good future would be if we all had equal opportunity, we could all pursue our happiness and, you know, a bunch of those kind of things. But how do we get there in terms of technology? How do we solve large global issues, climate change, food, water? And I came to the conclusion that this is mostly about governance and policy and using technology to its best possible purpose. Right? So bottom line of that to me is that in the future, in the near future, we will have all the tools and tech and science we need. But will we have the will?
Yeah.
That to me is the key question. We have to have the policy and the will that says we're going to use this technology as follows. Yeah. And also to create collective benefit, not like in the US, for example, where we have huge benefit of technology, but only applies to 5 or 10% of people. You know, everybody else is still struggling the same way. So this kind of Darwinistic approach to the future is probably going to result in a lot of upheaval. Yeah. And, you know, maybe that's going to turn around in the US. I have great hopes for that. Yeah. But anyway, that's kind of my key topic. And then I have started a new initiative called the Fork in the Road Project. And this is riffing off Buckminster Fuller, famous futurist, forkintheroadproject.com, where it's a non-profit undertaking to say, okay, the next 10 years, we really have to get our stuff together and design this future together so we can solve those big issues and still remain human.
Yeah, yeah, cool. Hey, look, I just so thankful for your time, Gerd. If people want to hear more or watch some of your videos, what's the easiest way they can get to see you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty big on YouTube. I have over 1,000 hours worth of speeches, so you can spend a weekend in fast forward mode. Okay. It's gerdtube.com. That's the shortcut. GERD, like my name. Gerdtube.com will take you to my YouTube channel. Okay. And my website is futuristgerd.com, of course. So lots and lots of materials on this. And yeah, let me finish by saying one thing: the future is better than we think. You know, I think this is really important to realize. The future is not dark. It's not made by somebody else. We design the future as we want it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time. No, me. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.